5 college football playoff dark horses that I think have a shot to make the CFP this year and a new 12-team playoff system. My name is Harrison Graham. Welcome into Verts, where we talk about NFL and college football. Our first college football episode here, so if you're a huge college football fan, shout out your favorite team in the comments, but also hit that subscribe button if you want us to do more college football videos. All right, my first college football playoff dark horse team is the Arizona Wildcats. Arizona, hopping into the Big 12 this year, was one of the surprise teams of college football last year. 10-3 record, Alamo Bowl champs, beat Oklahoma, who had a good year last year, and is off to the SEC. I think Arizona comes into the Big 12 and has a chance to win the conference or at least be one of the top 2 or 3 teams. And I think the Big 12 this year, obviously they're going to have at least one playoff team, but I think there's a shot they could get a second and maybe even a third, depending on what happens in the SEC, Big 10, and ACC. And a big reason why I'm high on Arizona is I think they have one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Noah Fifita. If you don't know the name, get to know it. Go watch some of his games, highlights from last year. He kind of reminds you of Kyler Murray. Undersized kid, can move around in the pocket, strong arm for being 5'10" or whatever he is, but he's fantastic. Throws with the accuracy, touch, 72% completion last year, almost 3,000 yards, and that's after not starting, I believe, the first 3 games of the season. 25 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. He's a magician back there, man. I think he's a dark horse Heisman candidate as well. I'm really high on Fifita and what this kid can do this year for the Wildcats. Now, obviously, a big question for Arizona, too, is Jedd Fisch took the Washington job. Brent Brennan, coming in from San Jose State, was able to keep Fifita and his top weapon, McMillan, at wide receiver, who we'll talk about in a minute. Is that a seamless transition at head coach? That's a legitimate question to ask, especially considering they're going into a new conference. Now, you look at some of the toughest games on Arizona's schedule. 2 tough ones out of the gate. At Kansas State, September 13th. At Utah, September 28th. Now, interesting note, that game against Kansas State, Wildcats v. Wildcats, non-conference game. It was already scheduled in advance, and they just kept it on the books. So they're kind of playing 10 conference games, but that one's not going to count in the standings. But still a significant one, as Kansas State figures to be in the mix in the Big 12 championship hunt as well. Utah, I think, is the Big 12 front runners for me. They're too high to be considered a dark horse, so that's going to be tough. I think if you can split those games, if you're Arizona on the road, that would be clutch. West Virginia at home, a surprise team last year. You get them in your building, though. Cross-country flight, that should be advantage Arizona. Late season road test at TCU. I think a team that could bounce back this year after a disappointing season in 2023 after they made the national championship the year prior. But no Oklahoma State on the schedule, team that was in the Big 12 title game a year ago. Iowa State, Kansas not on the schedule either. 2 teams that could be in the mix to win the conference as well. So I think things fall pretty well for the Wildcats. And lastly, why Arizona? Other than the reasons I've given. I think Fifita's a stud. The receiver, McMillan, is going to be a first-round pick, 6'5". He can run a sub-4.4 as well. Had over 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns last season. I think that combination is going to continue between those 2 this year. They got a nice transfer portal running back as well. And after September, after those 2 tough road games, October and November are very manageable. Split those 2 road tests early, win most of the rest of your games, get to 10-2, 11-1. You're probably going to be a top 12 team in the country and get into the college football playoff. Let me know how you guys feel about the Arizona Wildcats this year when it comes to their playoff chances. Can the Miami Hurricanes finally live up to the hype as a college football playoff contender, especially in this new 12-team system? Let's talk about the Hurricanes here on Verts. Disappointing season last year. Mario Cristobal owned it, said it was a disaster. They lost in the Pinstripe Bowl to Rutgers. I know Greg Schiano's done a decent job up there, but come on, man. You can't be losing bowl games to Rutgers if you're the Miami Hurricanes. I don't care how long it's been since you've been a legit top 10, top 15 program. That's just embarrassing. But there's a lot of reasons for excitement here in 2024. For one, new quarterback in town. Cam Ward, the best transfer portal quarterback this year, in my opinion, comes over from Washington State, where he had a monster season a year ago for the Cougars. 3,700 yards, 25 touchdowns to 7 picks. Decent athlete as well, can move and run around. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the country this year and a potential high draft pick. And he's got the tools to really make things happen for this Hurricanes offense. And I'm excited to see him play at in theory, a high-level college football program. Again, Miami hasn't been there in a while, but with this 12-team expanded playoff, there's no reason why, if you're the Hurricanes, making the playoff at least every few years isn't a realistic goal. And I think this year it should be a goal of Miami's to compete in the ACC for that conference and to challenge for a playoff spot. You look at their toughest games on their schedule. At Florida week 1. I don't think Florida's a very good football team, but it's still an SEC squad. It's on the road. You got to find a way to win that game. Period. End of story. That's a tone setter game. You just got to go win it if you are the Hurricanes. Virginia Tech, I think they're a sneaky team in the ACC. Get them at home, though, late September. At Louisville, October 19th, they feel like a prime regression team. They started 10-0 last year, then just faltered down the stretch. But that's still a game you got to factor in. Next week, Florida State, but it's at home. So in theory, you should at least have a shot in that game. I mean, Florida State's likely going to be favored, but that's a game you have a shot in. I'll say this. I think Cam Ward's a better quarterback than DJ Uiagalelei. And when you have the better quarterback, you have a shot. Go to Syracuse on a short week on the road after that. So, got a tough little stretch there, but no Clemson on the schedule, no NC State on the schedule. So, listen, if you're Miami, even if you lose to Florida State, your other 11 games are games that you're not necessarily going to win them all. Like, it's not a go through the motions. Like, they're not that status as a program right now, but you're going to be favored in a lot of them if you're Miami. So the opportunity is there for the Hurricanes. I think the manageable schedule is a big reason why. And you've got one of the best QB receiver combos in the country in Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo. Restrepo's a stud, huge season last year. He's going to be a high draft pick. And listen, say what you want about Mario Cristobal, who we'll talk about more in a second, but their defense is loaded with talent. They've spent in the transfer portal. They've recruited well. That's something that's never been an issue with Cristobal. It's, can he be a game manager? Is he an impact guy on game day? We all remember the meltdown against Georgia Tech last year, where if they take a knee, the game's over, and for some reason they're handing the ball off and they get stripped and Georgia Tech wins on a miraculous play. Mario Cristobal has to leave his mark on Saturdays. This is a make or break year for him. His last season at Oregon, they fall apart, get blown out a couple of times. He goes to Miami, a place he's familiar with. He's got to show he's the guy moving forward this year. Like I said, there were too many embarrassing moments last year. Losing to Rutgers in the bowl game, the Georgia Tech fiasco. Like, this team has talent. It is up to Cristobal and his coaching staff to get the most out of these players. The good news is they have a stud at quarterback and a top-tier wide receiver. If the defense can do its part with this schedule, 10-plus wins is on the table, and that means you got a shot at making the playoff. Can Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Volunteers make the college football playoff this year out of a loaded SEC? I think they're a dark horse team to potentially do it. We're going to talk about them next here on 4 Verts. 9-4 season last year, pretty solid, right? Coming off the year before when they were in the college football playoff mix before Hendon Hooker tore his ACL. Joe Milton steps in, up and down, but still get 9 wins out of that group a year ago. Won the Citrus Bowl. Not going to say it was some great season, but back-to-back 9-plus win seasons for Tennessee, that has not happened in a long time. So I think Heupel is doing a nice job there. Now you have a new quarterback. And let me make sure I get this right. I've been practicing this. Our guy Nico Iamaleava. Nico Iamaleava, who played the bowl game against Iowa, played pretty well and only threw for like 150 yards, but remember, Iowa's got one of the best defenses in the country year in and year out, especially last year. That offense was just a joke. He still had 4 total touchdowns. Threw for 1, ran for 3 more. 5-star recruit last year. He was a true freshman, and he still got the red shirt because he played in less than 4 games. So Nico is a talented kid, and if he can live up to the billing of even just being pretty good this year, I think they got a shot to make a run this season. Number one, playing in the SEC, you probably only got to win 9 games to have a real shot. The strength of schedule, the committee is going to give the SEC and the Big Ten, the benefit of the doubt, because those are the 2 best conferences now with the way the college football landscape has shifted. If Tennessee goes 9-3, as you look at some of their tougher games, making the playoff is not off the table. Now, tough test out of conference early on. NC State, September 7th. That's not going to be an easy game. I think they're a top-tier ACC team this year. A little teaser talking about them on our dark horses to make the playoff as well. At Oklahoma on October 19th. Still kind of weird to say that. SEC matchup there. Obviously, you got Bama at home as well. Or Bama's on the 19th. Oklahoma September 21st, excuse me. Georgia on the schedule also. But you don't have Texas, don't have A&M, don't have Ole Miss. Typo there in Georgia. You got them on November 16th. Apologies for that. But no Texas, no A&M, no Ole Miss. Obviously, it's not an easy schedule, but you got to handle NC State. I think that's number one. Split Bama and Georgia. Can you steal one of those? Beat Oklahoma? I think you go 2-2 in those 4 games on the tougher games right there that I mentioned. Win the rest of them, maybe even drop one, 9-3. You're probably getting in. You're probably going to be a playoff team. My biggest question with Tennessee is, number one, can Nico play at a high enough level? First-year starter. That's obviously a legitimate question mark, even as a 5-star recruit. But number two, you got to get him some help. I think that's something that let Tennessee down last year. Sure, Joe Milton wasn't as good as Hendon Hooker, but they could not replace the weapons they lost in Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. Brew McCoy's back for another season. Squirrel White is in the mix as well. Those guys got to be more consistent, and they got to find a consistent runner as well at the running back position. So if they can get good play from their skill guys, and if Nico can just be a guy that spreads the ball around a little bit and gets his weapons the ball, and if the defense holds up, is above average, I think 9-10 wins is on the table for Tennessee. And again, in the SEC, that's very much a real possibility. For more college football coverage, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let's talk about the North Carolina State Wolfpack as a potential college football playoff dark horse team here on 4 Verts. 9-win team a year ago, pretty good, as Dave Doran, the head coach, has been there for a while. Lost a close bowl game to Avery Johnson and the Kansas State Wildcats in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Never forget the Pop-Tarts Bowl, folks. It was one to remember. But I'm high on the Pack this year. And a big reason why is they got a new quarterback, Grayson McCall, who is an instant upgrade over Brennan Armstrong. No question about it in my mind, especially as a passer. This guy's been around, man. Put up a ton of numbers at Coastal Carolina. 6th year of college football. He's a vet. 70%, 10,000 career passing yards, 88 touchdowns against 14 interceptions. He's also mobile, over 1,100 career rushing yards and 18 touchdowns on the ground. This is a guy who is a dual-threat college quarterback and is an experienced player, which, look, at a program like NC State that's not a blue blood, you need a guy like this if you're going to have a chance to make the 12-team college football playoff. An experienced vet, a gettable guy in the transfer portal to help you go potentially make a run. You look at NC State's schedule. Is this manageable enough to make a run? I would say pretty easily it is. Now, out of the gates, Tennessee September 7th, that's tough, man. I had them as another CFP dark horse here on 4 Verts. That's not going to be an easy game. But if you could find a way to win it, that certainly could change the complexion of your season. Number one, it gives you a great resume builder. And number two, that's arguably the hardest game on your schedule outside of at Clemson. That's obviously going to be tough on September 21st. But the next toughest game on paper is late in the year at North Carolina. No Florida State on the schedule. This is pretty manageable if you're NC State. You could still make a playoff run without beating Tennessee, but if you somehow did beat them, that Clemson game is kind of just if we win it, if we don't, no big deal. Get to 10-2, 11-1, still have a shot to make the 12-team playoff. And that's a big reason why I think they're going to potentially be in the mix here. Number one, McCall brings experience and steadiness to the position, whereas Brennan Armstrong was a little bit erratic. And this is one of the easier schedules for a Power 4 team. Now, that could work against them if they're on the bubble. But again, playing Tennessee out of conference helps, and beating them would go a long way. You win that game over Tennessee if you're NC State, that puts you in a real good position as the schedule really softens up. My biggest questions are this. Can they find a running back that is capable? Brennan Armstrong led the pack in rushing with over 600 yards last year. Their leading running back was at like 307 yards. Their second leading rusher was a receiver. Like, it was embarrassing. McCall is going to help as a runner, but someone out of the backfield has got to emerge. Dave Doran's teams are usually pretty solid defensively, so I feel okay there. But, man, they got to have more balance in terms of running the football. But NC State, I think potentially a special year for the Pack. My final college football playoff dark horse here on 4 Verts is Iowa State. The Iowa State Cyclones, who have a veteran coach in Matt Campbell, and a team that I think is poised to make a run in the Big 12 this year. Only went 7-6 last year, but that's a little bit deceiving because they lost a bunch of tight games early in the year. They didn't have an identity on offense. Remember, they had that gambling scandal where their projected starting quarterback, Hunter Deckers, was unavailable for the entire season, so they had quarterback question marks. But those QB question marks quickly were answered last year, as they have a rising star at quarterback, in my opinion, and maybe the best quarterback in the country that no one's ever heard of, in Rocco Becht. This guy quietly had a monster year for Iowa State. Threw for over 3,100 yards, 23 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. Not the best athlete. He's not going to move around back there that much, but this guy can flat out deliver the football. He's tough. He's a classic Matt Campbell type of guy. Easily their best quarterback since Brock Purdy. And I think potentially Matt Campbell's best team. And that's crazy to think about with the players that have come through this program in recent years. Brock Purdy, who's a top 10, top 12 NFL quarterback right now with the San Francisco 49ers, David Montgomery, Hakeem Butler. Like, they've had studs come through this program, several defensive players as well. But with Becht at quarterback, back for another year, 2 stud receivers in Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, who combined for 1,800 yards and 13 touchdowns last season, this team can do some real damage in the Big 12. Because one thing you know is pretty much always going to be the case with Iowa State is they're going to be tough as hell on both sides of the ball, and they're going to play defense. They play that kind of 3-3-5, bend, don't break, make you dink and dunk down the field, and typically teams get impatient and make mistakes when going up against defenses like that, and Iowa State is very disciplined in their defensive scheme. So I feel good about their defense, and their offense is as explosive as it's maybe ever been with the playmakers they have on the outside. Now, the challenge with Iowa State, compared to some of our other dark horses we've discussed here on 4 Verts, I think this is one of the tougher schedules in the Big 12 especially. Number one, and before we get to conference play, Matt Campbell has got to get over this Iowa hump. I can't remember his exact record, but he's only beaten them once or twice out of like 8 tries now, 9 tries, and like every game's the same. They lose like 13-10, 10-7, 17-14. They've got to go to Iowa and win. You can't get if you lose that game, your playoff chances diminish because you're at Houston in late September, at West Virginia, a team that won 9 games last year, at Kansas, one of the best offenses in the Big 12 led by Jalen Daniels, at Utah, I think the best team in the Big 12, and at Kansas State, a top 3 Big 12 team on paper. It's a tough schedule, which is why I was hesitant to put them on here, but I think they got the team to make a run. And, you know, when you have a tougher schedule, you benefit in the metrics and you could stay high in the rankings. That's certainly a possibility. So, look, I like Iowa State. I'm bullish on them. The schedule's tough, and you have to beat Iowa. It really is that simple. You cannot lose to Iowa again if you're Matt Campbell. The offense is better than Iowa's offense by a country mile. Iowa's going to have a great defense. We know that. But I think the gap in offense should be significant enough to go win that game on the road if you are the Cyclones. Appreciate everybody for tuning in to Verts today as we went over some dark horse college football playoff contenders. If you want more college football videos, NFL videos here on YouTube, we're going to have you covered on just about a daily basis. I'm Harrison Graham. Hit the subscribe button. We will see you next time.